It's Saturday, October 19th. I'm meteorologist Rochelle Peart of 13 News Now, and I'm tracking tropical storm Nestor. Has not quite made landfall yet, but with that 8 a.m. advisory, it continues to have those winds at 50 miles per hour. It's moving at a good clip, 17 in the northeasterly direction. Pressure has actually dropped from the 5 a.m. to the 8 a.m. advisory, now down to 996 millibars, so not too much of a drop, but just a little strengthening within Nestor. And right now, it's 80 miles west-southwest of Panama City, Florida. We'll have another update coming out at 11. So as far as Atlantic hurricane season goes, we had Melissa and now Nestor. The last two storms got to tropical storm strength. Of course, we had Lorenzo, which reached major hurricane strength, and we still have a few more names to go before we end off the hurricane season. So let's check out Nestor's wind field. They're starting to feel those tropical storm force winds up towards Panama City and other areas on the Florida Panhandle. And as we move through the next day or so, by 11:30 p.m. on Saturday, we're looking at coastal South Carolina, seeing those tropical storm impacts, and it's going to continue to flirt with the coast with those tropical storm force winds as we move through the rest of the weekend. So by 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, we're starting to see some impacts back toward the Outer Banks, maybe even into parts of coastal Virginia, getting some of those tropical storm force winds, or at least gusts into that range. And then it's going to move off of the coast, no longer impacting anyone as we move into the day on Monday. So keeping an eye on the tropics, here's what Nestor looks like right now. Again, we are seeing somewhat of non-tropical characteristics as we look at that satellite image, but it is still a tropical storm. But as it moves inland, we are going to see that storm losing those tropical characteristics for sure. Now, one thing that I did notice between the 5 a.m. and the 8 a.m. advisories, you can see a little bit here. You can see this light blue color. That's the track. So it was a little bit closer to Apalachicola with that 5 a.m. advisory, but it took a little bit of a track back toward the north and west. So now it's a little bit farther to the south and west of Panama City. So we're going to have to continue to watch Nestor to see exactly where it makes landfall, but areas along the Panhandle and then also back towards some other states starting to see those impacts, especially with that little bit of a shift off to the west. So watching Nestor is going to continue to be a fast mover. It's going to move through these areas very quickly, as we've seen with those movement now at 17 miles per hour. So we're watching impacts for coastal North Carolina and coastal Virginia for overnight tonight and into Sunday morning, because again, this is going to be a quick moving storm. So we're going to see a few hours of impact still, even if the storm does not make a direct overhead movement to your specific area, as we're looking toward coastal Virginia and coastal North Carolina as well. And then the storm's going to move out to sea, fizzling out, becoming post-tropical, however, as it moves inland after landfall, as it looks somewhere in Florida. So as things look right now, severe weather threat is higher on Saturday for Florida and the Carolinas. There is still a threat for coastal North Carolina for some severe weather for tomorrow on Sunday, so we're keeping an eye on that. And then we're watching gusty winds, heavy rain, and potentially some minor tidal flooding for our neighbors in Virginia. So the threats: coastal Virginia, North Carolina, this is where we're looking for right now. Wind looks like a good threat. Also rain as well. We're watching the potential for some minor tidal flooding around the Sewells Point area. And as far as tornado threats go, that's going to stay low. They've had a lot of those threats down toward Florida, Sarasota County in Florida, the Tampa coverage areas. Our sister station, WTSP, definitely keeping an eye on that through the morning today. So sustained winds up to 30 miles per hour. Again, this is for coastal Virginia and North Carolina. Gusts possible up to 45 miles per hour, and rain totals anywhere between about 1 to 3 inches, and we could have some isolated higher amounts. So let's talk about the tidal flooding. I mentioned Sewells Point. This is what we're looking at for the next few high tide cycles. Not even getting into that nuisance flooding for today's high tides and into early tomorrow morning. It's going to be tomorrow afternoon where we're going to be watching for the chance for some minor tidal flooding at Sewells Point. So keeping an eye on that as well. So it's October. It's gotten a little bit quieter here across the Atlantic basin. We don't have any other storms that we're watching right now except for Nestor, but we still do have the potential to see named storms October and yes, even into November. Tropical season, or the Atlantic hurricane season, goes until the end of November. But again, we've also had storms developing in January, which is outside of that typical June to November timeframe. So continuing to keep an eye on the Atlantic basin. So if you want to connect, I'm posting information about Nestor, what we can expect across all different areas in the storm's path. You can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Twitter, and you can also find me on Instagram at Rochelle TV.